Hi, I'm Marianne Clyde,
And I'm Lorna McGill.
and we're here with the Isn't She Amazing podcast with another amazing guest. Shock, shock. Lorna, tell us about our guest.
I'm so excited to introduce Vanessa Engelhardt. She and I met at a nonprofit event, and we just became kind of acquainted. And she started telling me about what she did. We're both financial people. So what Vanessa's passionate about is in empowering older adults to face the challenges of aging. So that's a very broad topic, but she's in a transition right now. So I guess we could start to talk about that. Is what is this big transition that you're doing, or that you're right in the middle of?
Oh, yeah, let's hear about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I, about 6 years ago, decided to go back to school. I was a real estate broker. I still am, but I'm not doing that. It's not my focus. And I was focusing on working with older adults who were transitioning from their homes into a community like assisted living, or maybe even another type of a community. And most of them were kind of coming out of the houses that they've lived in for 36 years or more, they were moving because there was some sort of something that precipitated that, maybe an illness, maybe some other situation that caused them to need to move. And so as I was doing that, I was just realizing there was not a lot of services available at that time for older adults. And I also have always just had respect and just I say a passion, really, enjoyed my grandparents and just had a passion for working with older people. And at that time I was, said, okay, well, I think I'm going to go back to school for this. And I did, and I focused in gerontology and aging studies. So my degree is a bachelor's of science in that program. And kind of as I was going through the program, I just ended up focusing on financial exploitation of older adults, and the study of what is the outcomes of financial exploitation. And we think of like physical abuse, and we think of caregiver exploitation and different kinds of things, but financial abuse is kind of treated as it's just about money. But statistically, older adults who have been mistreated, and this is all kinds, and I can give you all the citations for this, but they're like 300 times higher risk of death.
Wow.
Is that not
compared
crazy?
to three. Yeah. And specifically, believe it or not, financial exploitation. I found another, speaking to another researcher and a group, and they used to be all affiliated with, I believe most of them were affiliated with UVA, but they did a study about caregiver exploitation, physical abuse, financial exploitation, and maybe a combination. And they found that the people who had been victims of financial exploitation and caregivers kind of tied, had the lowest survival rates.
Really?
Compared. Yes.
And when
Yes.
she told me that in a conversation we had earlier, I was like, that just blew me away.
Just
Yeah.
because of the increased stress?
Well, a lot of it's, you have like a certain amount of reserves, and then you just kind of get depleted. And this is, some of it's study, and then some of it's just my kind of understanding of the situation. I believe that you just kind of get your reserves depleted. You kind of, if
Then
you
you're
don't have money, then you're not, if you're in a financial situation where you've lost your money, you may have to change housing, you may not be able to afford food, so it just really affects like all aspects. And I think one of the biggest factors is you doubt yourself. A
wow.
lot of people who become a victim, who are victimized, something happens to them, you doubt yourself, you blame yourself. This was my fault. I did this. I made this decision. I made this choice. And unfortunately, this with financial exploitation, there is a lot of victim blaming that goes on that you don't really see so much in the other types of exploitation. But with financial exploitation, it's very easy to blame someone. Well, you handed over your money, or we were just speaking, maybe somebody opened the computer. I had a friend who had a huge amount of money that they lost as an example of exploitation, and it was one telephone call. That's it.
One
So
telephone call did that?
one telephone
Well,
call.
And I think, you mentioned this in another conversation we had, was we have to be careful about opening the door.
Yes. Yes, because it is just like that. Whether you're opening the door on the telephone, that's opening the door. Your computer, you're opening the door. If somebody sends you a text message, you're opening the door. There's a multitude, and somebody could physically be knocking at the door, but the FTC collects fraud when people call in or they report fraud through their Sentinel system. And statistically, for the ages of, I think it was like 50, wrote this down. Yeah. The number one access point for people 70 and over is the telephone. And then the number one access point for people who are 50 to 70 is social media. So like instant messages that people are getting on some form of social media, some outreach on social media. So those are those doors.
I get that stuff all the time. Like you have these pictures of these men that want to friend you, or I get texts all the time like, hey, what's going on? Hey, want to go to dinner? And you like kind of glance at it because it looks very familiar, and you're like, I don't have this phone number in my contacts, but I can see how you could think, well, maybe I don't know who that person is, and you could decide to respond. Or you're lonely, and you're like, hey, someone's texting me.
Yeah.
Well, they make it a plausible thing. Whatever it is always got to be plausible. Otherwise, immediately your sensors would be like, no, this doesn't make any sense. But at first it sounds plausible, and most times with a scam, it's a rush. Something's a rush. They play on an emotion. It's an emotion of a stress emotion, a fear emotion, an emotion about something they're going to do something to a friend, or it could be in a romance scam. It could be your loneliness. Somebody is paying attention to you. It's always some play on some type of emotion. Most of the time it's like a very fast contact, and most of the time it's something that makes sense for the second. And then if you give yourself just that little bit of time, I always say, like, to respond and not react, you may be able to use your wisdom. And I know you and I talked a lot about this. And for me, I think it's so, so important as we're older. I don't care what level of education that you have, like a formal education means absolutely nothing, but you're wise and you just living in the life over a period of time, you're wise. So just learning to like use your own wisdom. Does this make sense? Is what they're saying to me really make sense? No, that like you said, the number doesn't look familiar, so I'm not going to answer it, or or it might be, but let it go to voicemail, and I can check it later when I have time to think about it, and then I can think and go through it. And also, like, does this feel right? If it doesn't feel right, yeah, trust that instinct.
Trust
And
the
I mean,
instinct.
I think as we are, yeah, I think I appreciate that, you're talking about like aging. And I think that a lot of times, and specifically in this too, we blame it on age. Like, well, older people, they're not really, on top of things as much, but this can happen to anyone. And I think it's so, so important. And in fact, for 2023 year to date, the highest number of complaints are coming from 30 to 39-year-olds.
Really?
So they are actually the ones who are getting or maybe they're reporting more, but that's the statistic about the most scams are happening in that age range. But with older adults, they're losing a lot more because they have a lot more assets. So they lose a lot more money than other age ranges. But the number of scams, it's not just older adults. So I think that's another thing is we tend to kind of make it kind of like an age issue, but it's happening to everybody.
Wow. And the truth is, I don't answer the phone if I don't know the number. It's very rare because it's like if they need me, they'll leave a voicemail.
Exactly.
Just because I think the telephone creates an urgency,
Yes.
and Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, he talks about the difference between what's important and what's urgent. And a phone call is always urgent, but not necessarily important. And so that's why it's easier for me not to answer the phone at dinner or not answer the phone if I don't know the phone number, or because
Right.
it's most of the time these days, I don't know who it is. It's usually a political call, I think,
Yeah.
9 times out of 10.
Like, I don't want to buy this. Yeah.
That's right. But
And I have to say, if it's somebody that you know,
Mhm.
they're going to totally understand if you didn't answer because you wanted the opportunity to check it out.
Mm,
So you're
absolutely.
really not losing anything if you allow it to go to voicemail.
Right. But you're right. That extra, take a deep
Yeah.
breath and back up. Just don't answer, don't say anything, hang up, Yeah, your best friend's not going to be offended because they're calling from a friend's phone number and you didn't recognize it. That's
Unless they can't leave a message and they need you.
they got a real emergency, right?
Yeah.
So Vanessa, tell me now you're working with seniors. What about this nonprofit that you're starting? Is that for seniors also?
Yeah.
Can you tell me about it? Are you prepared to talk about that?
Yes,
Well,
I am.
you should
I
say
have
your
a
name.
name. I have a name, but I'm still working on the website because right now, I don't have the budget to hire people to do that at this moment in time. So I'm still in the process of just like establishing everything. But I have been working with John Schwartz also from the and I always mess his thing up, and I'm so sorry, John, I apologize. Center to End Financial Exploitation. And so he and I talk quite a lot, and kind of I've gone to a couple of his events to just be a little bit of a support. He started the nonprofit about actively 2.5 years ago. And so we're kind of doing the same thing. We met at a triad meeting, which is a group that is geared towards focusing on issues related to the elders in the community and older adults and just trying to prevent crime. And so we met there. And but I kind of have a little bit, his background is in criminology and mine is kind of on the psychological and social aspects of aging, and my experiences are a little bit different, definitely coming into this from a different side of it. I'm really focused on like the well-being. I would like to really have people as you're aging, and myself included, um, empowered to use your skills, use your wisdom, and um, you know life, we're talking about transition. There's so many things that happen in life, and a lot of them are things you don't expect. And I'm experiencing things I didn't expect to happen in my life, but I'm here. And so what am I going to do about it?
That's
What
exactly.
do I do in this situation? And it's really, for me, trying to get people to focus on um the choice. I think sometimes it's easy to get stuck where we feel like we don't have a choice about a situation.
Mhm.
And there are things happen, yeah, But what are you going to do about it? That's your choice.
So
And
how are
nobody can
you
take
gonna
that away from you.
so how are you gonna contact people? Will it be like, will you be giving seminars? Will you be
Yes.
educating? And
Yes.
so you'll be speaking to groups of people about the
Yes.
things that happen or the dangers that you see and what to do about it, or how's that gonna work?
So prevention is so, so, so important because currently financial exploitation, and this is a kind of a blanket statement, every state, every county is going to be very different. But currently financial exploitation is typically only referred for civil prosecution, which means that you would have to have the money as a person to try to get your money back from someone. You would need to go to court on your own.
Ah,
So
Some
you already, it's like
cases,
adding insult to injury, like you're already out money, now you've got to put more out. And hope.
right. So some cases for sure are definitely, going to be prosecuted on the criminal side through the attorney generals and things like that, but not all.
mhm.
And so it's still in the process where it's not consistent. Other forms of abuse are consistently, fall under the other category. They are going to be, prosecuted criminally. But this is still, even though it can have such dire impacts. And so that's, to me, what kind of brought me to it, was that the prevention is the key, because the if the ball starts rolling on the negative end, as I said before, it can create a lot of havoc mentally, physically. People have they start having mental health issues and
Yeah.
declines, and those lead to physical declines. And it just is a very not a great place to go. So prevention for me was always the key. I just felt like that was so, so important, to try to give people the ability to help themselves, protect themselves.
And what advice would you have now for our audience, that if they would find themselves, like how would they protect themselves ahead of time? What kind of things can they watch for?
Well, I think that you need to watch, and there's so many different kinds of exploitation. If it's somebody coming into your life,
Hmm.
that maybe, you've had a situation where you've had a life change. Maybe you have had a spouse who passed away. Maybe you've had a divorce. You've had a situation. So you're in a change, and then you have kind of somebody new coming around. Maybe they're eventually like asking to borrow money. I mean, those kinds of things are like starter points. You can also have situations where, again, somebody is just contacting you, and it may relate to something else, and that could be just on the phone. It could be just a general scam. And we've already kind of gone over that I really think you have to protect the door. You have to not open the door. You have to be aware. I don't want people to live their life in fear, though, and that's a situation. You don't want to, you have to live your life, but I really would like people to trust your instincts. And the situation, if you're also in a situation where you feel uncomfortable, like you can't tell your family or friends
Oh,
about a situation that's going on, that's maybe a clue that maybe you're not comfortable about this new friend who all of a sudden is hanging out with you, and then slowly, hey, could you lend me money? um I've talked to people who work at banks, experience this all the time. I've spoken to quite a few people who have had situations where they've had customers that come in and they don't normally get money, but all of a sudden they're getting money. And the teller is like, this is abnormal for this person. Come to find out that maybe it's a home improvement scam, somebody who's asking for way more money. Once they become friendly with you, you need a repair done on your house, and then all of a sudden now they're asking for a whole bunch more money. They need to borrow money, or they have a family drama that they need money for. Those are kinds of things that are all kind of red flags. And again, if you feel uncomfortable sharing the information with somebody else, that's probably a red flag that there's maybe something not right about that situation, and you really should reach out to somebody that you trust.
That's great advice.
Lorna, were you and I talking about somebody,
I know, like, my
a
husband,
woman
like,
online that had met a guy, and I think she had,
oh,
did you
Vanessa,
send me that, or is that what Vanessa sent you?
no, Vanessa told me about that. I shared it with you. Yeah, you want to,
Okay, I thought, you're talking and my brain's kind of going, where did I hear a story like that?
but even like my
But that was
husband,
from you then.
yeah, it was, yeah. But my husband was actually at the bank. He went, to do a transaction. And then he said when he walked in, there was an elderly couple there. And he said they looked like they were devastated. And the husband had like wired $100,000.
Ooh.
And they were just beside themselves. And the bank was like, well, I was saying the money's gone, money's wired, we can't get it back for you. But I think when you talk about all those mental health issues and the doubt, and I mean, that's a significant amount of money for people. And if you lose that, like you said, it's at the teetering point where you can't, maybe that's even if it's not, that's what you use to pay your real estate taxes and your gas bill, and all of a sudden you don't have that cushion, or maybe you have enough that you're kind of getting in, but that's your little cushion if something goes wrong, and now it's gone. And so then when something an emergency happens or something unexpected, you can see how that happens, and just the mental health and how people just you start to unravel very quickly.
Well, Vanessa,
Yes.
you were
Blame each other, like you did it. Even like the relationship has got to suffer.
Yeah, you were talking
Oh,
earlier,
yeah.
Vanessa, about how anybody can be scammed and how you can
Yeah.
think, well, I'm an intelligent person, so I would never get scammed. But I think
Yeah.
the story that I remember was something about a woman and a man met online, I think through social media. And they were just, at beginning, they were just falling in love. So this was like a long planned sort of thing. And then it was like, oh, we're going to meet. So they were making plans to meet because they lived in different towns. And then they were so close at that point, and they're going to meet. So, why not? My daughter is having some financial problems, and I tried to get her this money and I couldn't. And so I don't know if she offered or if he said, do you have X amount of money that I can have for my daughter? And when I see you, when we meet, I'll pay you back, and so it, a lot of it made sense to her. And I think she ended up losing a ton of money. And then, of course, his plane was late. And then, oh my gosh, I can't make it. And oh my gosh, all of a sudden he just ghosted her, I suppose. And she was out, I forget how many tens of thousands of dollars that she was out. Was that something you shared with me, Lorna, or was that something I heard differently? But it was just at the same time we were talking about this elder abuse. And it's like, people are lonely. They meet on apps. They meet on, somebody was talking to me today about how his kids' spouses, they met playing, not Masters of the Universe. I'm not very good at games. It was like
some game.
Warlords, or obviously I don't play online games, but they met and they got married playing video games. Now I don't know a lot of elderly people that do that, but
it could be.
I don't know how to play, so let's just go there. But
yeah, I mean, we kind of like, we talk about these romance scams, but you bring up a good point. I mean, I'm sure it's a lot, but I remember, like online dating's been around now, and there are people that meet people and get married and that kind of thing. But I think, are you talking about Kate Kleinart?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so I met Kate Kleinart at an AARP scam jam is what they had, and
Jam
they do
jam.
those
Because
Well, you
scam
guys should go to
jams.
these fun
Yeah.
events. Yes.
Yeah, and she was there, and other people were there, and John was there, and the FBI, and a couple of different other organizations that were there to share. And again, prevention's so key. If you can stop, if you can do what you can to help yourself not fall victim, um, then that's really just so important. But there, it can happen to anybody, and it's so tricky. And in Kate's situation, and I hope that you all will have her on. She is an amazing, amazing woman, and she has dedicated her life now, and she speaks across the country about what happened to her and what she's doing about it. And she was targeted by a professional ring of people who do this. And it started out, and I said to her 100%, at one point, this person was contacting her, calling her through an app. After they connected through social media, then he would call her on an app. And it started out just very slowly. And this is that grooming process. And, we see that with other criminals. It's a criminal enterprise. And he started this process, and he would call her 5 and 6 times a day and just talk to her about her day. This is not, hot and steamy. This is, how is your day? She was a, foster mom for terminally ill dogs. He would ask about all the dogs and their names, and he knew their names. And this is just kind of like, and I said to her when we talked about it, I said, I would love somebody to call me 5 times a day and just ask, how am I doing, and talk about me, and, what can they do for my day? I mean, wouldn't that be nice? So it's really easy. It was not what I thought it was. I thought that, listening to her, it made it so plausible that it can happen to anyone.
What was the crime ring out for? What did they do?
They took the money. So gift cards, it started with gift
Gift
cards.
cards. Okay.
And so that's a really big thing. And I noticed, I was so happy that I think it was County of Fauquier. They had a sign up at the local store that said, are you buying gift cards? Gift cards can be used for fraud. And I thought that was really great that they were posting that, because it did start with gift cards, because they're really untraceable.
Oh,
So yeah, so it started with gift cards, but ultimately she gave a lot more. But what you were talking about, also the thing that really, really caught me was, at one point he asked her for money, and he said, I have money, I can pay you back. So it started out very slowly. And he actually gave her a website that worked to go to his Bank of America account. It was not a Bank of America account, but she actually logged in. It had a password set up and everything, which he gave her, like it was like getting into his bank account, but it was not real. It was very sophisticated.
oh.
So it looked completely real. So she, doing her due diligence, went in and checked and looked to see, was this real? Does he have the money before to hand over this money? And yeah, but it wasn't.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Thank you for sharing those things. That's it. So the key thing I'm hearing is trust your gut. You've said it in a couple different ways. If you'd be embarrassed to tell somebody that you're doing it, then maybe there's something wrong. If there's something wrong in your spirit, that I get a stomach ache when this guy calls, or something like that,
Yeah.
and it just sounds like we have to learn to trust ourselves, and to know that even though we're smart people, beware of emergency things. I think what
Yes, it's
set
that.
my friend off when what happened on the back of her computer is an alarm went off on her computer. And then there was this floating Microsoft box. Warning, warning, you've been hacked. Call this number, Microsoft, there's their logo, there's all this stuff. And she couldn't shut down the alarm, but it created like a panic in her. And, you know, who knows, she could have unplugged her computer. She could have, you know, done a couple things, but she didn't
Right,
at that time. And she
right,
said,
Well, because you're like, my computer's like getting attacked.
yes,
right.
All my stuff on here.
Yeah,
you know, then some guy pops up and says, oh, here, let me handle it for you. Okay, you
yeah,
know, and it wasn't that simple because she had checks. She, like that woman, it was like, no, here's my name, here's my badge number, here's my, you know, and here's the phone number. Same
yes.
as your, so I think to, you know, watch out for anybody who tries to rush you to do anything.
Right.
Like, even
Rushing
like
is the key.
that flashing and that noise, it unravels you just that.
Yeah,
Exactly. It's anything that gives you that like that fear, like that I have to do something immediately, like
adrenaline, yeah,
an emotion. It's meant to create emotion
yeah.
and to keep you off guard because you can't think clearly when all that's going on.
Right.
And that's intentional.
That's the whole point.
And I think you said at one point, just like pause, like
Yes.
just take a breath and use your wisdom. Like we have lots of wisdom as we've gotten older. So just take it. If it's so urgent, like it can wait a little bit longer.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. And like, that, by the way, Marianne, that's a common one in there. John speaks about one case. There was a gentleman recently that just lost, I can't remember how much money he lost in I think it was a Norton scam. Similar
Oh.
thing, like it came up, but it wasn't Norton. It came up, and of course, it has a bogus number and that kind of thing. It sometimes it's hard to know who to call. And again, we say this over and over again, but I would like to say again, if you're going to try to reach out to any government entity, that website will be .gov, period. End of story at the end. Whatever you're looking for, .gov. If it says .us, but not .gov, it's not. Yeah, .gov.
Not the government. So
yes, or like she could have taken her computer to an in-store person somewhere.
right.
Well, I think that some of it is it's hard to tell if it's real or it's not. Like if it's like, oh, and you're like, do I have Norton or do I have McAfee? Like because you get like a subscription, and so then you don't really remember because you have all these other subscriptions, and you're like, well, yeah, of course, it must have been McAfee, and then it's so easy to push the button because you're like, well, they're what's protecting my computer.
yeah, the scam has to be plausible in order for it to work. It has to be something that kind of makes sense, and that's how you can get tricked. And again, that's why I try to again emphasize to so many people that if this has happened to you, something happened to you. These are really, 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 these people this is what they do. They are professionals. It is so easy for that to happen. I know that, people will still blame themselves. I know that, that's going to go through your mind, but please remember that these are professionals, and it is so easy for anyone to make a mistake like that. It's very easy.
Well,
Fortunately, it has big consequences, but it is easy.
Before we went on the air, you said because people blame themselves and other people blame them. You gave them your money, you gave them your number, you gave them this kind of thing. And you said this is no different than if somebody walks up on a street and points a gun at you and says, give me your purse.
Yeah.
Your
response is the same.
Do? You're going to hand over your purse. It's well thought out. It's effective. It creates a crisis for you. So you're not thinking clearly. You're stressed, and your brain does not work when you're under stress. So that's, take a breath and think, what can I do, you know?
Yeah.
Right.
But
Yeah.
that
Does this
is a
make
good overview.
sense? Does this make sense? What does this feel like? If you're feeling all tense and rushed, and those few seconds, unless it truly is an emergency, you know, somebody's there, but you know, those few seconds, minutes of time will not matter.
Oh, well, thank you. You shared so much rich information.
Didn't I tell you she was awesome?
So how do people get in touch with you?
So right now I have my email is Vanessa at Lemonade, and it's lemon, AIDE, lemonade.org. And hopefully I will have my website up and running soon, and
Can't wait to
my
see it.
nonprofit all established, and I can start doing presentation.
Well, that's exciting because
That
I think what
exciting?
you've got to offer is really, really necessary, because I think everybody knows somebody that has
When
had
it's
some
in a
kind of,
process, it's also, it doesn't matter what socioeconomic background. I mean, it's like everybody is at risk for this, everyone, because we all have emotions and we all react in very similar ways. So
right.
we
Well,
all
they're,
need to
you
be
know,
careful. That's
they
great.
know how to get you.
Yeah.
So Vanessa, good luck with your lemonade, and I hope you get the website up soon, because I'm going to be looking for it.
Thank you.
Let me just
Yes.
ask you one more thing before we leave. And do you have any words of wisdom to share with our audience, that something that maybe you either want to reiterate or that we haven't asked you, that you think our audience needs to know about what they can do to protect themselves, what to watch out for, who to go to?
Well, the who to go to be quite honest with you, is kind of difficult. Obviously the police, but with financial exploitation, depending on what it is, you may need to go to other places to file complaints. It may need to be the FBI, it may need to be Secret Service, it may need to be all of them, it may need to be state police. So unfortunately, that is also one of the issues that, from my viewpoint, is that there are very many places to file complaints, depending on what it is. So you can start with your local police and speak to them. That would be a really kind of the starting point, but it all depends on the type. And there are, I'm learning too, like organizations, you know, if you have an issue with banks, there is a organization, and maybe we can put it in the information because I don't have the number, but there is a banking commissioner in each state, which I had no idea. But there is a banking commissioner in each state. Depending on if you have a state bank, you can actually file a complaint with the banking commissioner, and they could help you if you're having an issue. Like, let's say you did have a wire fraud with your bank and you notified your bank, but they couldn't do anything about it or wouldn't do anything. You know, you can also file complaints there. And then there is the Office of Comptroller of the Currency, and that is for larger national banks. And the Office of Comptroller of Currency will get involved and kind of mediate between you and the bank. And so there are a lot of different places depending on the type of financial exploitation. So unfortunately, and I wish I could say there was one telephone number that you called and that's the end of it, but unfortunately right now, the structure of the way that things are, it can be many different places depending on the type of exploitation that you have
So when you get
experienced.
this fabulous website up and running, are you going to include all this information on there?
Absolutely, yes, yes.
Perfect.
That's gonna be
Perfect.
so
We'll try to get
valuable.
that information to our audience.
And
So
also getting linked up with some support groups. AARP has a fraud network, and then fraud.org, which is sponsored by, let me just let you know who that is, because they are also, they have a really good resource. I think it's called the Consumer Bureau, and I will look that up. And I've spoken to their fraud rep before, and he is very knowledgeable, 20 years. It's good just to hear someone say, "I'm really sorry that happened to you." And you asked me what I would like to say, and I would like to say that to everyone who has experienced something like this. I'm sorry that that happened to you, because that sometimes is not, you don't always get that from people. And I just want everybody to know, if that's happened to you, that I'm sorry. And you're not alone. There are people out there who are thinking about you. And, there are resources. You may not find them right away. Sometimes you have to look for them, but there are resources. And I just want them to know that they're not alone. And I think that this can be isolating too.
I think you're
And
right.
yeah, I think and that this is something that happened to you. It's not you though. And I think that's really, really important to understand.
That's a powerful message to
That
end.
is such
So
a great.
thank you so much, Vanessa. You've been a big, big source of really good information. So thank you so much. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you both. Thank you for the work that you're doing too.
Wow.
Well, thank you for being amazing.
Yep. And thank you for joining us at Isn't She Amazing podcast. We'll see you next time.